The 2020 Minority Health Film Festival offers a diverse variety of films and events that we just wouldn't be able to offer in the in-person cinema experience. But I think what really makes it unique is the focus not only on public health issues, but the issues that really concern communities of color. If you're looking for a reason to engage or to try it out, this is the perfect time. Just go to mkefilm.org/MHFF.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 13th day of the 2020 Minority Health Film Festival and the community conversation called What We Want from Our Mothers, the impact of generational economic fatigue on maternal health. My name is Heidi Moore. I'm the Director of Emerging Markets and Inclusion for Froedtert Health. Representing, however, Froedtert and the Medical College of Wisconsin. I am so excited to be here with all of you today, and also to have the opportunity with our esteemed panel to have such a rich discussion about this topic. So before we get into the panel discussion, I would be remiss if I did not thank all of the sponsors for the Minority Health Film Festival this year. It's so many, can't name them all now, but I definitely would like to give a special thank you to the Froedtert and the Medical College of Wisconsin Inclusion Health Clinic. The Inclusion Health Clinic serves the LGBTQIA+ community. And there's so much within that community. They also address HIV intervention, people living with HIV. And so I just want to thank them so much for their sponsorship of today's conversation. So the conversation today, the catalyst for it is really one of the films in the Minority Health Film Festival. So the film is called Through the Night. And the film is about healthcare owners. So this couple that owns a healthcare or daycare service. It's an in-home daycare service. And it's also about the families who receive childcare. And so if you haven't had a chance to see it, please, you still have time until Thursday to go and see this fabulous film. I think it really captures so many different aspects about what contributes to our health as individuals, what contributes to our health as a community, and what actually, for those of us who are representing employers, what contributes to the health of the employees within those organizations. And so please go and check it out. So let's get started. Here's how we'll get started. I'll share with you the names and the organizations of the panelists, and I'll ask for them to come to the virtual stage. And then from there, we'll get into some dialogue and you can learn more about the panelists at that time. So with that being said, I want to invite one of my colleagues, Dr. Eugene Pruitt, up to the virtual stage. Hey, Dr. Pruitt.
Hey.
Dr. Pruitt is a primary care physician with Froedtert and the Medical College of Wisconsin. I always get so thrilled when I have an opportunity to talk to him. Sometimes, well, before the pandemic, sometimes I would try to catch him as he's headed off to a different meeting or a different patient. So anyways, I'm so happy to have Dr. Pruitt here. And then also I'd like to invite another colleague to join us. So Matthew Lewis. And Matthew will join us with Deborah Ford Lewis as well. Hey, y'all. So this panel discussion is happening because of Matthew and another colleague of ours called Joanna, who is Joanna Woodbury. So Matthew, thank you for coming up with this idea and pulling these fabulous folks together. Deborah, thank you for joining us. And they have a little special something else to share as they introduce themselves. And then I want to also bring up, last but not least, Keisha Shakes, who is our other panelist. Hi, Keisha.
Hi.
So Keisha also is an advocate in the community, and she also is a community organization founder. Her organization is Mindful Mama. I know I cannot wait to hear more about Mindful Mamas. So before we get into that, let me just ask you all, and all of you, if you could all respond to this. So can you share a little bit more about yourselves? And then also, what one thing for now, what one thing really stood out as you watch the film, or if you haven't had a chance to watch the film yet, as you think about this topic, what stands out for you? So share a little bit more about yourself. Let's each go around and then share with us the response to that question. What stood out for you? Anyone can start.
Okay.
Go ahead. All right, Keisha.
Okay. So for me, I'm Keisha Thanks. My organization is the Mindful Mama. I am a mindful mama. That's where it comes from, just in how I parent and how generationally I decided to do some things differently than how I was parented and how I was raised. But the thing that stood out in the film the most for me was how the daycare provider essentially became the village. The families, a lot of families that are under economic distress, a lot of times that economic distress, it is intergenerational. So they don't have the resources of, having a grandparent or a great grandparent that can kind of serve as daycare or childcare for their children, and they still have to work. And they have to provide for their families, especially when they are single mothers. And the child care centers take that responsibility on, and you see that same thing play out in even in the educational system. You have teachers that feel like they are social workers, they're parenting coaches, and all of these other things. And so when you have this economic breakdown, it has such a vast impact on the family structure that ultimately impacts health outcomes, because if you're constantly in a state of stress, that affects your cortisol levels, that affects how you process information, that affects how you digest food, it affects how, everything. And so then we start to look at all of the disparities in our community. So everything is interconnected, and you got to see that play out in the film.
Yeah, thank you, Keisha, so much. Dr. Pruitt, I think you were going to say something. Oh, I'm sorry, we can't hear you.
Oh, am I unmuted? Okay, I think.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Yeah, I'm Eugene Pruitt. I'm really, really happy to be here. Just a little bit about me. I've been in Milwaukee since 1980. I started my practice in the inner city of Milwaukee, right on the corner of 12th and North Avenue. I was there for at least 17 years, and then a couple of other locations in town. I have always wanted to be a doctor in the community. So even when I came to the medical college in 2001, I kept the bulk of my community patients, and then have had the opportunity to add more people from the community to my practice. So, I got a feel for the streets. It's not like I'm coming from this academic place. It's just Sherman Park, and so we, those of us who live there, know that it's not what it used to be, and so it's we're speaking from the heart as well as from the mind. The portion of the film that affected me the most, and I mean, when I finished watching it, I almost had a tear in my eye, because it was the love with which the owners of the daycare took care of those children, and not only the children, but also their parents. And this is the type of love and concern we have to have for children and people delivering care to children, whether they be at a daycare center, whether they be a mom, whether they be sort of like the matriarch of their neighborhood. But that portion of the film just really, really touched me. My mom was a school teacher. My wife is a educator, and so it sort of brought back some wonderful memories. But that's really what touched me from the film.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Pruitt. So Matthew, were you share? Can you share a little bit more about yourself? And Deborah as well.
You want to go first, Mom?
Sure. Deborah Ford Lewis, for the Sherman Park Community Association, have been active in Sherman Park quite a while. I also worked for MPS for a number of years, a lot of years. To see both the impact in terms of the kids coming, but as a mom of two boys, Nunu was my Jackie, and so when I was watching that film, it was like all this stuff came flowing back because she truly, I knew her because all the things that those mothers relied on for her, I relied on. She helped raise my kids and sometimes helped assuage that guilt and allowed me to work the way I needed to work because I knew my kids were being taken care of if I was there.
Wow, thank you. Thank you for that. And Matthew.
My name is Matthew Lewis. I'm a program coordinator at MCW in the ID clinic. And I think at the root of myself, I'm a poet. So stories are really impactful to me. So watching this film really just brought back so many memories. And I guess was affirming to me that like, this is a story for so many people living today. As my mom said, like, Jackie was Nunu. So all these moments, I was like, Jackie said that. I remember those pots. I remember putting up everybody do a share. So it was just this, this really, I don't want to say nostalgic, but it was just so familiar. And I guess I appreciated that because it brought a different lens of viewing health through this very familiar story.
Thank you, Matthew. And if I may, I'll add a little bit too in my experience in watching the film. So I had a chance to share with some of you that there were some aspects of the film that were actually sort of painful for me. Now, not painful enough where it triggered any trauma, but painful in regards to it brought back to me some of the guilt. So as I watched the film, I kept going back and forth, referring back to memories as a child, because my mom worked a full-time job in retail. And as you know, retail doesn't really pay much. But then in addition to that, she, for 16 years, went to college part-time to get her degree. And so for those of you who are old enough to know what the term latchkey kid, so I was the oldest of the kids. I was the latchkey kid, but we had my grandmother, right? And so my grandmother was there. And so we participated in daycare center more so than in-home daycare like Nunu and Pop Pop, who are two of the subjects in the film. But then fast forward, because, and so let me say this. So for that, I just reflected on how much deep appreciation I have for my mother and all the sacrifices she made, right? So then there's that part. And she did all of that and taught us that education could be the way out of poverty. So with that definitely has sort of played out for me. But now, what does that look like, especially in corporate America? So most of my jobs, I've worked for Fortune 500 companies, Forbes 100 companies, and then now I work for the regional healthcare system, which I'm so proud of in the area that I grew up in, which is Milwaukee. Working for those organizations, though, I traveled a lot, and I have 4 kids. So I remember with my second daughter, maybe I went back to work, I don't know, maybe after 3 months, but I remember bawling in the airport. First of all, when you go to the airport, especially for those of us who do a lot of travel through the airport, depending upon what city you're in, you don't see a lot of people that look like you. So anyway, so I'm in the airport feeling like this guilty Black mama, how dare I leave my child to go, those were all of the feelings. And so it was in-home daycare. It was my Auntie Patty, and it was, I had 2 Nunus. And that support system became very important. So that's what came up for me in the film as well. So we'll have an opportunity to share more about our different experiences and what came up for us in the film. Matthew, I want to come to you. So you shared that you and your mom watched the film together. And so y'all, if you didn't notice, that's Matthew and his mom right there on the panel. And so I think what's so interesting about that is the fact that you watched it together, but also the different perspectives that you probably both have. So Matthew, now that we know that's your mom, that Deborah is your mom, why is having this conversation so important for you?
I think it's extremely important for us to have because of the conversation that we are increasingly having to have. Just as I grow into adulthood, and I now observe my mom. You know, I think there's a difference. I identified a lot with the young woman Diana in the film. I think there's a difference when you're little and you see things, but you don't know what they mean. You don't have the words and the language to describe what's happening. But I think when you are of age and can comprehend, you can start to think about health on a different level and start to think about generational impacts of health. You start to put language to the things you've seen. So I thought it was important for us to watch it together because there are conversations that we have, whether it's my mom telling me to be careful of certain things or me reminding my mom, like, hey, relax. So I thought it was important for us to watch it together, especially before having this conversation, because those feelings, I think, can come up in ways that are quite raw. And we needed to watch it together, I think, to have those moments between us. I also thought it was important because on watching the trailer of the film the first time, I remember talking to Joanna and just saying, like, this is my life. Like, I just saw so many portions of my childhood in the film, and I needed to share that with my mom to be like, look at, don't you see so many of the experiences we shared with the people in the film? I think watching the film as the child of a mom who trusted someone like Nunu with us, I saw so much of the ways that Nunu helped children make sense of things without giving too much, in the same way that Miss Jackie did that for me. So in the way I did understand maybe certain things that my mom was going through, or Miss Jackie was there to affirm my feelings, but also let me know that my mom was working and just working so that she could take care of us and all those things. So I guess watching it together just made me appreciate my mom a lot more. You know, I don't get to see my mom in the car with the camera talking about how she feels. I don't get to see my mom in the office, wanting to come home to us. But I just one of the things I appreciate most about my mom is when we were little, she was just super intentional with making sure that she spent time with us when she could. So there was these Blockbuster nights we had where we'd go to Blockbuster and my brother and I both got 2 movies, and then we'd sit in my mom's big bed and watch the movies together on camera. And so there were moments like that in the film that just, I guess, make you appreciate the struggle. And the feelings that you have as a child would also help you put a more complete narrative to it. So I don't think that I ever felt resentment, but if I have unanswered questions, I feel like I have an easier place to address those now. We stopped the film while we were watching together, and had an opportunity to talk about those things, and it was really impactful for me.
Wow. So, Deborah, before I ask you your question, I don't know if there is anyone who's watching that doesn't know what Blockbuster was, but Blockbuster was the thing before Netflix. So just want to put that out there. Experience, because it was an experience. So thank you for sharing that, Matthew. So Deborah, listening to your son, what are your thoughts about that as a mother? And then also, how did watching the film feel for you?
One of the things that I sit here and tell you that the guilt never goes away. That day, I periodically ask my sons, I know I wasn't there as much as I should have been. I am grateful that Jackie was there to help, get my kids get over tough times, to fill in when I wasn't there, because it was not unusual for my kids to be there 10 hours a day. Sometimes. And I know they were in good hands, but as their mom, and you watch some other person seeing their milestones, telling you sometimes what's going on with your kids, you realize you missed stuff. I'm eternally grateful for her. But even now, the guilt stays that perhaps if I had been there more, maybe other things might have turned out differently. So that struck me. The other thing that struck me was how neglected herself, her health. How, when she gave everything she gave the kids, and I watched Jackie give everything she did to our kids, she neglected her health. And we talk about that now because we're both in the, only a day apart in terms of our ages. And we both find that over time you give so much to your kids, or you, like me, you don't take care of yourself because you've worked so much that you don't want to steal one more minute from your kids. Not one, but you don't take time for yourself. And I thought that when I was younger. I'm not so sure that was the correct thing to do, because in not being willing to take a minute more from them, I brought the stress home to them. So you get sharp with them. You're like, what? I can't. Come on, let's get it done. And don't think about that because just too much is going on. So.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So Keisha, I'm going to come to you, and then Dr. Pruitt, we're going to come to you because the topic of health definitely came up. So Keisha, I learned about your organization, Mindful Mama, and it's focused on helping families build strong relationships with their children during infancy and early childhood, and then also building community one baby at a time. So can you tell us more about Mindful Mama and Infinite Family Solutions? But then also, what are your thoughts about how parents can build strong relationships with their children while also having to depend on daycare, like a Nunu and Pop-Pop?
Okay. Well, just to give a little bit of background, Infinite Family Solutions is, or the Mindful Mama is what was formerly Infinite Family Solutions.
Okay.
I'm currently in the midst of a rebrand, and just kind of an introduction, because I feel like over the last few years, the work that I do with infant and maternal mental health has kind of gotten lost in the birthing world, and that's a component of the work that I do, but it doesn't encompass it in totality. So I came about this. My organization has been active for almost 11 years. I came about this. Actually, I was a single mom myself. I had a 2-year-old at the time, and I was laid off from probably the one job that I've ever had in my life where I felt like, okay, I can actually do this. This is something that I can turn into a career. And I just remember, and this happened back in 2009. And I remember the struggles that I was having as, I was unemployed. The job market, was completely tanked at that time. And it was impossible for me to get another job. And co-parenting wasn't really going smoothly for me at that point. And I remember just feeling very hopeless, but also having a really firm foundation in how I was parented and how I was raised. And I came into the work after having a conversation with someone about, children and how the children nowadays were, not the same as when we were growing up. And, I commented and I said, well, who's working with the parents? There's tons of programming for children, youth. They can get all sorts of supports and interventions, but where are the interventions for parents outside of, your typical things like healthcare, like Badger Care or Food Share, things like that. And I was introduced to the prenatal care coordination and child care coordination program. And shortly after getting involved with that and doing home visiting with moms, with pregnant women and new mothers, I realized that I was completely in over my head because the support that they needed was far beyond, giving free diapers or, helping them get a baby bed, once they gave birth. They needed a lot of emotional and mental health support. They needed a lot of parental support because they had a lot of parental trauma that they were dealing with and that they really didn't understand what that looked like. And it was having an impact on infant mortality, maternal mortality, and just overall lifestyle. So that's kind of the long, short version of how I got involved in this work. For parents, I would have to say the biggest thing is, establishing connections early on. And that's a lot easier to say than it is to do in some instances, especially if you've not had that modeled for you. A lot of time, when you have families, especially families that are living in severe poverty, a lot of times their resources are stretched so thin, they really don't have the time to devote to their children because they are constantly in survival mode. So it's, they're making it from one moment to the next. And I think about myself and my upbringing. My mother was a teen mom. So my mother had me at 17 years old, and thankfully I had my grandmother, I had aunts, I had a new Miss Taylor who, kept me. She lived down the block and, instilled and supported me in a lot of ways. But it's not like that anymore. You don't have the grandmothers down the block that will watch the kids, while mom goes to work. You don't have, I'm 42. I just turned 42 on Sunday, and thank you. And, there are people in my age group that are grandmothers, and I can't fathom what that looks like. And we're all working and we're getting established in our careers, or finally careers starting to take off. And now we are nurturing grandchildren at this age, so it's a lot different now versus then, especially considering the cost of living is significantly higher. Probably 40, 50 years ago, it was a lot easier to have, several children because you didn't have to worry about the cost of childcare. And it was a normal thing for the older siblings to watch the younger siblings, and you kind of had, more community help. But now with everybody in some sort of a bind, you really don't have that support anymore. And I remember, for myself going through that phase where, like I said, I was laid off and I didn't have a job for 2 years. And I remember taking a temp job at Wells Fargo. I will never forget this experience. And I remember having to work a second shift. So it was from 1:30 to 10 o'clock at night, and my daughter was 3. And first of all, I just hated the job. I was being micromanaged, and I did not come from a fast-paced, high production, micromanaged environment. So it was hard for me to adjust to that. And then also I felt like I never saw my baby. She was at her grandmother's house while I was at work. In the morning, I was, preparing to go to work, so I didn't get a chance to, see her that much. And then on the weekends when I was off, she may or may not have been with her father. So that, that impacted our time. And it was very hard for me. And there were times that I would get up from my desk and go and sit in the bathroom and just cry, or I would sit in the parking lot and cry, or I would go on break and just cry because I needed to take care of my child. But at the same time, I felt like I was failing as a mom. And so, the mom guilt is something that I see a lot, even with the families that I work with now. A number of them are in the same situation. The difference is, instead of one child and having, a support system, they have 4 children and no support system. And, you want to stay home with your sick child, but you can't call out of work because that means your job is gone, or not being able to get the proper authorizations for childcare so that you can send your child to childcare, or finding a quality childcare. There's a number of childcare providers out here, but finding one that is quality, where your children are going to be cared for and nurtured and poured into, that's hard. And it affects the children. And so to parents that are experiencing that, the best thing that I can advise them to do, and this is what I advise my moms to do, is to try to establish some sort of routine, something that they can accept. They children, especially young children, they need consistency and they need stability. And that stability could just be that, you know, before you go to bed, you do this one thing every time before bedtime, or in the morning when they get up, you do this one thing with them. It doesn't have to be this grand, you know, regimented schedule, but they need to have one thing that they know that they can rely on you for every day at the same time. That helps to create a healthy and a secure attachment. You can have a healthy attachment and not necessarily be secure, so that way your child, it helps build resiliency with them. So they have this one thing that they know that they can do with you. And it also helps to establish relationship between mom or dad and baby.
Wow. Thank you, Keisha. And thank you for the work that you do. That's just amazing. So I definitely want to learn more about that too, even after today's session.
Yeah.
So Dr. Pruitt, you heard 3 of us talk about mom guilt, first of all. But then in addition to that, in the film, we saw the caretaker, Nunu, right? She had a medical crisis. And then even some of the moms featured in the film, some of the parents featured in the film also brought up health concerns. So as you're hearing all of this, I mean, how do these care scenarios have an impact on us as individuals from a health standpoint? How are you seeing it in your patients?
Well, before I start, let me say to Miss Lewis, to Keisha, to you, to the ladies behind the camera, I hope that all of your guilt just goes away after this conference. You all sacrificed so much in order to have your children be where they are. You weren't running the streets. You weren't doing a lot of things that people connote with single mothers or moms who are struggling. So, you know, you all are worthy of much praise, much prayers, and thanking the Lord for you all to have been in your lives. You know, you guys were setting great examples for other moms in the communities, and so I just want to thank you. And anything that you may have in the sense of guilt, get rid of it, because the good you did far outweighs anything that you may not have done. And so I'm saying that the reason I'm saying that is that what I see during this time and in general is the immense stress that is put on people. And it's not just because of what's happening with COVID. It has so much to do with finding your place in this world and trying to take care of yourself while you're making such huge sacrifices. And that can be very, very difficult. And that's where we used to have a community that would take care of one another and address those needs, but that community to a certain degree doesn't exist the way that used to be. So what I see in my practice is immense psychiatric and mental health issues, guilt, depression, anxiety, lot of drug and alcohol addiction, lots and lots. And so I think that when it comes down to any type of stressful situation, it just accentuates all of those things. But there is a underlying bedrock of mental health problems that people are dealing with. Now, how does that translate into other things having to do with healthcare? When you're depressed or anxious or whatever that might be, it's just like I heard Miss Lewis say that sometimes you have a tendency to sacrifice yourself too much, just like Nunu was doing. And I think that what drives a lot of people is that they absolutely see and feel the void, and they just try to fill that void. And when I was watching Nunu, I just saw all that love and all of the effort she was putting in to fill the void, and then she forgot about herself. So I
Mm,
think that a lot of times women, men, we have to sort of reinforce those positive things in one another, but also caution one another about our health concerns. And I will tell you, if we don't do it for ourselves, I can't say no one is going to do it for us, but no one is going to reiterate it for us. So I just think a whole lot of mental health issues have so many untoward health consequences simply
mhm,
because we ignore ourselves. And so, you know,
mhm,
I, you know, my mom, like I said, was a school teacher, and I just have these vivid images in my mind about how she would work every day while she was still in pain so that she could
mm,
provide for my brother and I.
mhm,
And, you know, we had just wonderful, we had a tight community. So people would just tell them about how she needed to slow down or address her health. And fortunately, you know, she would listen to good advice.
mhm,
I think that if you have a physician with whom you can discuss these things, that is just like so valuable, so
mm,
valuable. And this is why I always talk about, you know, cultural competency in care. Um, and that doesn't mean that somebody that doesn't look like you or doesn't talk like you doesn't understand what you're going through. There are a lot of people who don't look and talk like you who are competent, but I think that cultural competence is so important, and also just being having a provider who's a listening ear, and then after they listen to you, then they can help direct because it has developed that doctor patient relationship. And I sort of tell people, vote with your feet. If you don't like what I am doing for you or giving to the doctor patient relationship, then please go find somebody that's going to be that for you, because I don't want you to be my disgruntled patient. I want you to be a happy, satisfied patient. So I guess the last thing I would say is that we have to do the best we can to remove the stigma
mm,
of mental health. The same way that you have high blood pressure is the same way that you should deal with having anxiety. The
mm,
same way you handle your diabetes, you should be handling your depression in the same manner.
mhm,
But, you know, I just really think that as a people, and I'm talking about Black people, brown people, and poor people, which includes poor white people,
mhm,
um, there has been this stigma that has developed, and it's not by accident. I mean,
mhm,
racism and sexism play so much in the development of stigma. And what we need to do is sort of investigate those roots of, you know, where does it come from when you say, oh, you know, she's just crazy?
mhm,
And does that have to do with the fact that somebody told you that because you were poor and black or because you were poor and white? Did it have something to do with the fact that you didn't have access to the resources you needed for good mental health?
mhm,
So I think that we have to question those things, that we have to reinforce in our communities, that that is something we need to decrease the stigma about, and that as a result of improvement in mental health, from there flows improvement in your physical health.
Woo! That was a lot to take in. Let's just pause. From the wisdom, Dr. Pruitt, from the wisdom. So we have a question that actually sort of speaks to that, right? And the question is, has the lack of self-care on the parts of the mom, so maybe we start with the moms here, has the lack of self-care on the parts of the moms affected any of us? And then do we care for ourselves differently because of what we saw maybe in our own moms, or maybe even, Dr. Pruitt, what we've learned? Because Deborah, you shared some about what you learned, and Keisha, you shared about something of what you learned. I've absolutely learned, and maybe that was even encouraged by you, Matthew, as a child, right, of a mom. So anyway, the question is, has the lack of self-care on the parts of the mom affected any of us? And then do we care for ourselves differently? So who'd like to?
I'm sorry, whoever, I'm sorry.
Well, for myself, I haven't had any serious health issues with not employing self-care. But I've experienced things, had moments where my blood pressure was a little elevated. I've had moments of anxiety. I have experienced weight gain because, when you are stressed and constantly, overworking and not resting, chances are you're not eating properly. You're opting for quick foods rather than taking your time to prepare fresh, healthy food. So that tends to cause weight gain, especially in the midsection. So I've experienced that, but that is mostly, that's where the mindful part comes in with the mindful mama, is really taking charge and taking care of your mental health and understanding how that affects even your babies, your infants, even in utero. It has an effect on how their brains develop, and how their brain develops, affects their emotional processing and their sensory processing. And you start to see the impacts of those things even, well after birth, and 6, 7, 12, 15, 22 years old, you see the effects of things that occurred and traumas that occurred during pregnancy during that time. So one of the things that I've really adapted is a mindfulness practice, which if any of you are familiar with, or anyone listening is familiar with mindfulness, it's really the art of being present with yourself. And it's the practice of noticing yourself. So noticing your body and how your body responds, because the emotional piece, the mental piece, it has a physiological impact. You might see something and be triggered and not recognize that your breathing has become shallow. Or your body goes into fight or flight. You may begin to sweat, or things that your fists are clenched, your jaw is tight, your shoulders are hot. And taking the time to notice yourself and notice your body and how you are feeling and how your body is physically responding in various situations has been a game changer for me. And it's something that I work with my moms on as well, to help kind of mitigate those things, and even taking the time to eat mindfully and being more considerate of the things that you are putting into your body. Instead of going for the chips, let's have an apple. Or you want something sweet, apple and peanut butter, like a caramel apple. And taking the time to actually sit down and enjoy that, and your body will reap the benefits over time.
Thank you, Keisha. Are you going to medical school? Just kidding. Good. You were going to say something too.
With the intention to go to med school, yeah.
Okay, all right, there you go. Thank you, Keisha. Deborah, you were going to say something too.
I think one of the things when you ask, does it have an impact? I think I come from a family that has all of the risk factors. If you talk about high blood pressure, diabetes, all of that stuff, black folks, it runs down my family. What I have come to reflect on is that when you're working and you're trying to make sure everything is going right for your kids and for the amount of time you spend with them, but they watch you. And to the extent that you neglect your health or you do things that are not necessarily healthy, your kids will follow that pattern. And Matthew will tell you, and his brother will tell you, I'm constantly fussing at them about, you got to watch this. You know, look at me like, you got to be kidding. We look at and so I think it's real important that in our quest to be everything and do everything for our kids, because we're working and we don't want them to feel neglected like I said, because we think we're away too much. Some of what Keisha was talking about is important. To step back and present good options, good lifestyles for them, so they in turn adopt them and not perpetuate unhealthy lifestyles. Because I've seen that, and I struggle with the consequences now of not being as mindful as I should have been. As I'm pre-diabetic, and for me, it's a constant struggle not to flip over there. And I think that it's a direct consequence of going, you know what, I got this, I can do this, I'll put this off till later, I'll do this. And that was probably not good. So I think as moms, we really have to be mindful to present good examples as well, walk the walk as well as not just talk the talk.
Thank you. Matthew, I'm going to come back to you with the next question we got, but Dr. Pruitt, it looked like you had something to share too with that question.
One of my expressions is that denial is the sharpest knife in the drawer. And so what happens from my point of view is that we will just deny things. And so in our denial, we can find sort of like some ease in not doing those things which are good for us. But I will say that, Keisha, I'm digging what you're saying from the point of view that so much of what people suffer from is one, genetic, but more than genetic, it's what's happening in the uterus during the time of pregnancy. And that is so critical. And that's why we have so much problem as a world, as a country, as a people, because people are thinking more about me, instead of us. And that goes down to pregnant women and the men who are supposed to be facilitating the good birth of their children, as opposed to some of the poor births that are happening. So I think that, once again, Keisha, I'm going to give you big props, sister, because what you're talking about and what Miss Lewis is talking about, that needs to be just reiterated through the community. I mean, we could have a gathering like this every day in order to sort of share these important messages, because really, so many people that I take care of, if they had just had a chance in the womb, if they had just had a chance in the womb, there's a good chance that their life would have been better. And Miss Lewis is absolutely right. Those little babies who are crawling around on the floor are looking up at you, and they're listening to you, and there is an impact that you are having. Let me just throw this out, and then I'm going to go on because I want to hear what Matthew has to say. Post-traumatic stress disorder, everybody thinks about a war veteran. The biggest group of people who have post-traumatic stress disorder are children and women. And why is that? Because of violence in families, sexual abuse, and so forth. Now, when you come from these type of dynamics, then it is so hard for you to even think of yourself as being worthy of self-care and respect. So once again, folks, I'm back to how mental health will lead to improved physical health. And if your self-worth ain't where it should be, that takes a lot of mindfulness and hard work. But we got to once again build this village, because our village is really sort of crumbling. So we got to rebuild our village, because what we're talking about today, so many people never have the opportunity to hear.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, can I just add on to that? And I wanted to mention it before, just epigenetically. So we all have been in our grandmother's wombs. Like, we were formed in our grandmother's wombs. So the trauma that our grandmothers experience has been genetically passed down to us. So we carry that in our body. So even the perinatal period is very critical when it comes down to mental health. And you can, through lifestyle changes and various choices, you can alter that, and you can reverse those impacts. But you have to be very intentional about it. The other thing that I wanted to mention was a cultural thing, specifically for Black women, which, we are always attached with the title of being strong. Strength is, it's a badge of honor, but it's something that is slowly killing us and killing our babies, because we're not allowed the space to be tired. We're not allowed the space to be hurt or to be angry. We have to, our mothers and grandmothers taught us, like, this is just what it is. You gotta deal with it. You gotta keep it moving. And when you are a mother, you don't really get the chance to sit down and kind of, just take a moment and unpack all of the things that you're experiencing. You're constantly go, 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 go. And when, I think about, say, for example, you're in Walmart and you see a mother, going in on her 2-year-old baby for doing things that 2-year-olds do. And we never stop to think that for a moment, that mom just might be exhausted. That mom has unmet needs, several unmet needs, and we automatically assume that, she is ill-equipped, or that she's just a poor parent, when in fact she's tired and unsupported. And just speaking about that and stigmas that come along with parenting and with motherhood in general, especially when you are a Black woman mothering. And that's something that we, as a community, I think we need to address that and hold more space for that, and more compassion for our mothers, and expecting women and birthing people, that we hold space for that, and that we're, more accommodating. Sometimes it might, I've been in the store and I've, talked to moms and, got down to baby's level and, talk to them and say, oh, you want the toy, I know. And that sort of thing, just modeling those behaviors, because those are things that they don't know. And, when you're frustrated, you can't calm something or someone down. When you're frustrated, you have to be calm. Two frustrated people is just gonna.
Yeah. Well, so Keisha, did you all see this? I had to get a Kleenex because you brought tears to my eyes, because when you made the statement about the connection each of us have to our grandmother's wombs. Just recently, Froedtert launched an Eradicating Racism and Enhancing Health Equity plan, and I'm not going to talk about that right now, but the thought about racism, the conversation that has been really big, right? most recently, and the lift, however, that will be required to eradicate racism. So here's why I bring it up. And a lot of my friends say I go deep, so I'm sorry about this. But when you think about our connection to our grandmother's womb, that we're not that far from slavery. And so, in this title of this conversation was about the generational aspect of all of this, right? And so then when you have some folks who perhaps, for whatever reason, they haven't had much experience with racism, they've been socialized to not talk about race and racism, whatever the case may be. But, sometimes we might have heard the question of, well, slavery was so long ago. Why do you have to talk about, no. To me, that comment was just an example of still how close this all is for us. So as I look at the time, I want to, Matthew, come to you. And I think, Dr. Pruitt, you had talked about the village. Everybody talked about the village. I think this question is really ties to that. So Matthew, I'll start with you. And then maybe if each one of you could speak to it and share your final words as we close out. The question from participants is, Nunu's husband had a more subtle part in the film, but you got the feeling he was incredibly important to not only for the logistics part, but also the love in that space. So just curious about the panel's thoughts about his role, which is Pop Pop. That was his name, right? Pop Pop. What are your thoughts about Pop Pop's role as it played out in the film?
I think for me, Pop Pop was it was like a complicated thing to watch. In some aspects, there were points where I was like frustrated. I was like, "Sir, if you don't start wiping those toys, because I know you saw your wife just like bent over because she's a kid." But at the same time, I was watching Pop Up like get down to love of the kids and like talk to them while they were upset. I just think it's a different personality. It's a different take, and it's the importance of what it is to be raised in a village. Is that one parent or one adult's approach may not be what is necessary or what is best for the moment. And I think that was super important for me. I think many times there are times where I value the fact that my father has a different approach to a problem. I don't seek his counsel in that way, or with Miss Jackie, or with my mom, or with my aunts, or like everyone in our village. But I think it was important because the kids held equal spaces for both Nunu and Pop Pop. Like even if it looked like some of in the clips that he was in the background, he was very much in the foreground for the.
Yeah, thank you, Matt.
That was my take on it. Also, it really speaks to the role of fathers and male figures in the role of parenting. We talk about parenting a lot of times. Men are left out of that conversation. They just bring, and they shouldn't be, because they bring a very necessary dynamic to that parent-child relationship. Women, we tend to be more task-oriented. Dads are the fun ones, though. They are the ones that really connect and do the fun things and meet the kids on their level versus, always having this task or the responsibility of the nurturing or the caretaking. They don't always have those demands on them. So they're able to meet the needs of the children in a different way.
Thank you.
But necessary nonetheless.
Ms. Lewis, your thoughts?
Oh, I was really happy to see him interacting with the kids because, and I think for a lot of the kids, I was fortunate. My father played a big role in my son's life and both my kids' life. He was Papa, and that I didn't find out about until after he was gone. But that's neither here nor there. But for some kids that were at Miss Jackie's, having a person like that would have been the only person, father-like figure in their lives. I thought I was really happy to see the gentle way he was interacting with them and talking with them and participating with them. I thought that was real important for some of those kids.
Yeah, and Dr. Pruitt.
So I think from a religious point of view, from a being a dad point of view, and being part of the community point of view, It is the, oh, I'm so sorry. It is the,
Doctors, right?
nah, I wish it was. I think it's a prank call. It is the responsibility of men to aid and abet women in the most positive way. So that means that it is our responsibility to aid and assist our wives, our sisters, our relatives, our aunts in doing what they need to do, because I really think when it comes down to children and family, women know better than men. Now, I will tell you this quick story. When I was in college, they used to have this foolish thing when it was a Black Power movement, and the question was, who is the culture bearer? Who is the bearer of culture? And some fools had the nerve to respond, the man. And how foolish that is. It is a mother who is the bearer of culture. Were it not for a mother, a child would grow up without a good understanding of its culture. Then they would say, who's stronger, a man or a woman? And so then the fools would say, a man, because we're physically strong. And I would say, you guys are fools. The woman is stronger because a woman can have a baby and you guys can't stand a Charlie horse. And so when I saw the father, I said, this brother is aiding and abetting. He's making it easier for this sister to do not just what she wanted, but what she knew was necessary. Now, we as fathers definitely have a role, but one of the things that we should exemplify is that we aid the women in the community. Now, this is a huge, huge message that has to be communicated to men of all race, colors, and creeds. And then, you know, the relationship would work out better, and then one another could look out for each other because the relationship was is better. I think that um, men need to be involved with both their sons and their daughters. If anybody thinks that a woman can raise a daughter or a son without a good example of a man, they're gravely mistaken, because um, look at so many young men and young women making poor choices because they saw poor choices exemplified by their father, not by their mother, but by their father. So I think one of the main roles that we can exemplify, well, I'm a Muslim. So in Islam, it says that a woman can have all the money that she makes. It's her money. But when it comes down to the responsibility of providing for the family, it's the man's responsibility. And why does he provide for the family? So that he can help his wife do the best that she can for her children. And this is a message that we need to have resounding if we expect people to have love for themselves and take care of themselves. If you don't love yourself, you will not take care of yourself. And if you don't love yourself, you sure as heck are not going to take care of anybody else. So once again, back to this whole thing of Miss Lewis and Keisha, the people behind the camera, building this environment of nurturing so that people will learn, hey, not only is it okay, it's okay for me to take care of myself. No, it's not okay. It is something that you have to prioritize, because without you, what your baby's gonna do? Just like, Nunu. I mean, when she got sick, I was just like, oh my God, this is part of a bad movie getting ready to happen, because girlfriend is going to die, and then this is going to be a terrible, tragic ending.
Yes. Well, wow. So that was amazing. As we wrap up, because I see we're at time, I'm going to ask you all a rapid round, just one final word or sentence. We go around. But as you're thinking about that, I just want to share right before this panel discussion was the discussion actually with the filmmaker, and I was able to participate in that. So if you haven't had a chance to see Through the Night yet, please go to the mkefilm.org/MHFF, Minority Health Film Festival, MHFF, and then you can still access the film all the way through Thursday, the 24th. And so I was able to ask about Nunu's health. I was able to ask, well, how is she doing after all of that? And so what we learned is, you saw it in the film, and so I don't want to give the film away for those who didn't have a chance to see it, but there was some sort of implications to, right, that illness she had. And so for one particular thing that had to do with her vision, that's still the case. But other than that, sort of like Ms. Lewis, what you said, she has started paying attention more, Dr. Pruitt, like you were saying, of paying attention and taking care of her health. And so, and of course, Pop has been helping her to do that. So it is good to hear that, things are going well for them in the recovery period. So rapid fire, so we can wrap up. And Keisha, I'm gonna start with you. I'm gonna go to Matthew, Ms. Lewis, and Dr. Pruitt, I'm gonna end with you. Rapid fire, one word or sentence. What do you want everyone to know?
Breathe. I want everyone to breathe. Take a moment and breathe. Take deep breaths and be mindful and aware of yourself and in the space that you're in. And extend grace to yourself. Give yourself permission to not be okay. And know that you are supported in that.
Thank you. Matthew.
Take care of your mom, even when she doesn't let you. Just find ways of communicating and taking care of your mom.
Thank you.
Balance. Find balance as a mom so you can be a better mom.
Thank you. Dr. Pruitt.
Be a leader in your community. Be a person that others in your community know that they can trust and depend on. Be of strong heart. Don't be dismayed. There's always something good if you develop a relationship and help other people, no matter what else is going on in the world around you. Just be a good member of your community.
Thank you all. That's my final word. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you.
It's been a lot of fun. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we're going to close out with a short video, but hopefully this conversation was meaningful for you. I have found some healing. So thank you all.
Thank you.
The 2020 Minority Health Film Festival offers a diverse variety of films and events that we just wouldn't be able to offer in the in-person cinema experience. But I think what really makes it unique is the focus not only on public health issues, but the issues that really concern communities of color. If you're looking for a reason to engage or to try it out, this is the perfect time. Just go to mkefilm.org/MHFF